Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to this episode of Love and Abuse. Today I want to talk about probably one of the most egregious and abusive behaviors that can stem from an emotionally abusive relationship. And that is the threat of suicide. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. And I don't know if you've ever been in this situation or have had any type of threat that was similar in nature. Like, if you leave me, I'll do this. Or if you do that, well, I'm just going to call your job and tell them you're an awful person. There's some sort of threat involved. But today's episode is going to focus mainly on the threat of suicide. But you can use the suggestions I offer for other scenarios too. But I'm going to focus on when someone says, you know what, if you leave me, I love you so much, I'm going to kill myself. It's just playing with your emotions. It is abusing your compassion, abusing your empathy, and guilting you into staying in what I would call a very unhealthy situation. What anyone would probably call an unhealthy situation. But this is not love. This is fear. When somebody says that, they're saying it out of fear. So we're gonna talk about that in a moment. I do want to say that with any episode of Love and Abuse, please remember that all of this information is meant for informational and educational purposes only. Always consult a professional before making any changes that could affect your health and well-being. Because I'm giving you one angle, one possible outlook from my point of view, especially when someone threatens suicide. You want to make sure that you are getting all the professional help that you need. And hopefully the other person needs too, if they're willing to go and get help with you. And, that's one of the suggestions, of course, is when someone says something like that, hey, let's go get some help. Let's talk to a therapist. Let's go to counseling together. Let's figure this out. That could be one of the suggestions. You'll find a lot of suggestions to deal with something like this online. You'll find advice on how to work with someone that says that. And I haven't found too many pieces of advice that seem like a good way out of this. And I've been thinking about it. I've been trying on scenarios in my mind. I've been working on this. I've been reading articles to figure out what the best way to handle this is. Because I've had this happen, in couples that I've worked with, not to this extent, but something like this maybe in their past. Even though from what I've seen, 99% of the time, it's an empty threat, somebody can pull it off and make it happen. Their goal is to make you feel guilty enough to stay in the relationship or keep doing what they want you to do because they're afraid. They think if you leave, they're nothing without you. They think that their happiness comes from you. They think that their worthiness comes from you. Their lovableness comes from you. They put all of their time, energy, and attention into you to get what they don't have inside themselves back. And we do this in relationships. We want to get these things from our partner so that we can feel good, we can feel important, we can feel loved. But what happens is when someone goes into the relationship and longs and desires for what I would consider gaps in their life or empty holes that need filling that they didn't get growing up from their childhood, when they don't have the right type of healthy love and time and attention from their parents or their caretakers, what ends up happening is that they have these empty spaces inside themselves. And they need to fill these empty spaces with someone else's love and time and attention and support because they didn't get it, probably from their parents. I mean, this is one angle. Like I said, you'll definitely want to talk to a professional when it comes to something this serious, but this is how I view it, is that when we go into a relationship and we're missing components of ourselves, missing the love that we want to feel, or the compassion that we want to feel, or anything that makes us feel important, validated, and worthy, if we don't have that in our life before we enter a relationship, we might expect the other person to fulfill that for us. And what that does is create a high dependency on the other person. So the relationship starts off great and you're getting all this time and attention and love and care. And then one day the relationship might not be working anymore and you want to get out of it. Now the other person feels like they are going to be incomplete, and they are also going to be very lonely and scared and especially not happy and feeling like they are worthless and unlovable. And when you are the source of all that for them, they become dependent and you become drained. And when you're in this type of relationship, when someone drains you like that, you want to distance yourself from them. You want to get away from that type of person. They're very needy and they want to be around you and they're very clingy. I'm not putting anyone down that's needy or clingy. I was there. I was there for many years. I was that needy, clingy person. And I felt like without that other person in my life, I would never be happy again. I would never be loved again. That one person fulfilled everything I was missing. This is why I don't really like the comment or the phrase, "you complete me." Because what it's saying is that I'm not complete without you, therefore you have to stick around in order for me to be fulfilled and happy and feel worthy and loved. Without you, I am incomplete, therefore I will always be unhappy, so you'll feel guilty if you don't stick around. And because you're so compassionate and loving and empathetic, you probably will stick around, even though you're not in love anymore. This is what can happen. You fall out of love because that person feels so draining. And when you decide that you don't want to be in the relationship anymore, you feel like leaving will hurt that person so much that you choose to stay against your own better judgment, against your own personal desires or wishes, on your own personal wants or needs. You end up staying for them, but not for you. And this is like saying, I give up and I'm not here to honor me anymore. And I'm just going to be unhappy while that person is happy because I'm so afraid of hurting that person. And believe me, that person is going to take advantage of that. Once you allow the behavior of someone making you feel bad and making you their only source of happiness and their only source of feeling loved and validated, once you get into that dangerous emotional cocktail, it's very difficult to get out. Because typically people who get into that kind of relationship are empathetic and compassionate and supportive and generous and kind and caring. All of the good stuff. But that good stuff gets used against you. So I'm just laying out this foundation that if you're in a type of relationship where the other person feels dependent and clingy and needy, and they're always wanting to be with you and they're always wanting to know where you are. I mean, it goes on and on. You might have to report everywhere you go. You might have to report who you talk to. And it can get quite deep and intrusive. And not everyone's like that, but a lot of relationships can turn into that when the other person has that deep need for you to supply them love and energy and all of the things that they may not have enough of in themselves. And what they need to do, because they don't have enough in themselves, is practice self-love, self-compassion, increasing their self-worth, validating themselves, and working on themselves all the time. It's personal improvement 101. Work on yourself, fulfill yourself so that you can bring the best version of you into your relationship. If you're not the best version of you, it doesn't mean you can't have a relationship, but even when you're in the relationship and you're not the best version of yourself, however you define that, you can still work on yourself. You still know that they aren't causing the problems inside of you. You might have problems. You might have challenges. You might have emotional triggers, and you got to work on those things. And when you work on those things and improve those things in yourself, you stop relying so much on the other person trying to make that up for you. Because that's the dangerous part. When you haven't had enough love from your mom or your dad growing up, maybe there was some neglect, and even if it was unintentional, maybe you just didn't have an emotional connection with one or both of them. Maybe one of them wasn't there. Maybe both weren't there. Maybe you were raised by foster parents. There's all kinds of reasons that we didn't get enough of what we needed as a kid. But when you didn't get a lot of this stuff or some of this stuff, if you don't work on filling that in yourself, by loving yourself, by treating yourself as your best friend, treating yourself as you would want your mom or dad to treat you. And that might mean, for example, pretending to be your mom or dad and say, hey, you know what? I just want to let you know that I am so proud of you. I mean, when you could say that to yourself, from yourself, you start to fill those gaps. You start to fill what's missing or what's lacking. When you start to fill those gaps, you start becoming more happy internally instead of relying on external factors. I'm not saying this is the solution, but I'm saying when you give yourself love and give yourself compassion and show yourself that you are worthy, you are important, you start filling in those gaps, then you're not so much pining and longing for someone else to do it for you. Because as soon as you rely on someone else to do it for you, that means they have to be there all the time, every time you need it. That means they might have to be around 24/7 just to make sure that you're happy, that you're fulfilled, that all your needs are met, that all your wants are met. And when you're in that scenario, that's when the dependency or codependency forms. If you are both dependent on each other, and one of you decides to go on vacation for a week, leaving the other person behind, that might be a week of torture for one or both of you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't miss someone. When you're in a healthy relationship, missing someone is usually a sign that you care about each other and you want to be with each other. This is more along the lines of, what dysfunctions am I complementing in you? What dysfunctions do you have? What gaps are in you that I am fulfilling in a dysfunctional way? Because you can do it in a healthy, functional way. Like, hey, I'm so glad we're together, but if we were apart, I'd be okay. I see that as healthy and functional. But I would rather be with you, again, healthy and functional. But without you, I am nothing and I am miserable. You can go through that period of time. If you broke up, you might have to mourn the loss of the relationship. But afterward, you bounce back because you have a solid foundation, a solid emotional structure that you've built for yourself in the sense of self-love, self-compassion, and self-care. When you do all of that for yourself, when you're always working on improving yourself and fulfilling yourself, then your reliance on someone else to do it isn't so great. It can still be there. I'm not trying to take that away from you. I'm just saying be aware of what is lacking inside of you so that you're not so dependent on someone else to fill what's lacking. Doesn't mean you can't have relationships where you can fulfill each other's needs. Just means you have to be aware that if that person wasn't in your life, what would you have that's left over that might need some nurturing? So again, all of this is the foundation for what I'm talking about today, which is when someone emotionally abuses you by using a threat to guilt you into control. And the biggest guilt into control is a threat of suicide. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. I do call that the ultimate abuse of your empathy and compassion, because they know you're empathetic. They know you're compassionate. They know you care. And you do. You care about the other person. You probably don't want them to kill themselves. That's why they're saying it, typically. They know you don't want them to kill themselves, so they use that as a way to control you, as a way to guilt you into staying or doing what they want. So how do you handle it? What do you do when that happens? Again, it's hard to find really good information on this stuff. So I took some time and just compiled a few suggestions that might help you out of this situation. Again, this is my opinion, and every scenario is going to be different. And someone who's really serious about killing themselves, You just have to be aware that it's going to take some extra special skills on your part if you're in that moment, if you're in that situation to deal with. I mean, you're going to have to keep a level head. And that's probably the most important suggestion. Just keep a level head and know that they're coming from a place of fear, a fear of losing everything they've used you for to provide for them. I don't necessarily mean they used you, but in a way they did. They may have been loving you in a good, healthy way, but they have also been using you for the gaps in their life, for the empty spaces in their soul. So you not being in their life will reveal to them those empty spaces again, and they just don't want to face it. They don't want to face those empty spaces. It's so scary to them. So let me just give you some suggestions. If you're dealing with this, if you've ever dealt with it, if you know someone that's going through it, I think it's important to talk about this, even though it's probably one of the hardest topics to talk about. I think it's one of the most difficult scenarios to unfold. I mean, imagine if you've never gone through this. Imagine you want to leave the person you're with, and they say, well, if you leave, as soon as you're out the door, I'm going to kill myself. You don't even know what to do with that. It's so shocking. It's appalling. How do you deal with that? And so this is where you have to come back into yourself and realize, okay, they're afraid. They're really afraid. How do I get through this moment? So let me give you these suggestions. One is ask them a question. Are you serious, or are you just saying that so I'll feel guilty and stay? So that's a good first question. Now, if they say they're serious, here's where I go with this. And I don't want you to make this step one necessarily. This is one of a few steps that I'm going to share. And it can be in any order. It depends on the scenario, depends on the context of what's happening. And it could be this suggestion or it could be another suggestion. So don't necessarily take this in the order I give it. Just kind of file it in your mind or write it down and go through the scenario in your mind and see what might work best for the person that you're with. But let's just say that you ask them, are you serious? Or are you just saying that because you want to make me feel guilty? You ask that question. If they say they're serious, I treat it as if it was 100% truthful, and I call the police. This may not work for you, and this may be something that you have to do behind closed doors. And I'm not necessarily saying that you must do this, but if this happened in my life, again, this is my personal opinion, if this happened to me in my life, I would take them 100% serious if they said they were serious, and I would call the police and say, my girlfriend just said that she was going to commit suicide. What do I do? And they'll probably come over. Now, this is a very, I think, controversial suggestion, because what if calling the police pushes them over the edge? Well, here's why I gave this as a possible suggestion, is because 99% of the time, they're so afraid of you leaving, they don't really want to kill themselves. They're just trying to make you feel guilty. But what if they really were serious? I mean, let's just say that you knew for a fact that they were really going to kill themselves if you walked out the door. You knew for a fact. That means that they're lingering on the ledge, ready to jump off. That's how close they are to suicide. And the only thing that keeps them up there is your presence, which means that's mentally unstable. That's not mentally well. So I treat it as a serious threat, and I call the police. There might be professionals out there that disagree with me, and that's okay. And they may be right, depending on the scenario. I'm just giving you the first one, the most controversial one, because if they really are serious, A, I want someone to intervene, someone that can handle the situation, and B, it gives them something they didn't expect. Because if they're just using it as an empty threat, I want them accountable for that threat, because I never want them to use it again. If my girlfriend said, I'm going to kill myself if you leave, and I took it seriously, and the police came, she would probably think twice before telling me that again. Because here's what happens. When there's no accountability, they'll use it over and over again. So like I said, this is a controversial suggestion. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm saying that if it were me, I would probably do that, because I don't like to be threatened in that way. I don't like to be abused in that way. I don't like my compassion and my empathy used against me. So this first suggestion, You probably won't hear this suggestion anywhere else. And if you do, I'll be surprised. But call the police. Tell them that the person you're with just threatened to commit suicide and they said they were serious. This is pure accountability. It might even behoove you to call one of their family members to come over and talk to them. Because if they're that close to the edge, maybe they need to talk to someone, a friend, a family member that helps them get away from the edge or the ledge. You want to pull them back. And you can't be the one to do that because you're not their therapist. You're not their coach. And if you are a therapist or a coach, it's not your job to do it with your partner, especially when it's that close to something so serious. You need to find a way to have someone else intervene, someone that they trust, that they care about, that will come and help them off the ledge. So if it's not the police, it's someone they know and trust. So I got the controversial one out of the way, except I didn't tell you what to say if they said, well, I just want you to feel guilty. So let's just say that you said, are you serious? Or are you just saying that because you want me to feel guilty? Let's just say that I do want you to feel guilty, so you'll stay. Let's just say they say something like that, or something else like, I just love you so much. I know I won't be able to live without you. This is where suggestion 2 comes in. Just tell them, well, that's a really mean thing to tell someone you love. Instead of making me happy, you'd rather make me feel bad. Instead of wanting me to love you because you're trying hard to be a better person, you're using my compassion against me. That's not love, that's control. This is when you find out that perhaps they're not really serious. They just want to make you feel bad or guilty. You got to tell them that's not love, that's control. I can't love someone who threatens me like that. If you really want me to stay, you'll get help. If they really love you, they will get help. Because if they use a suicide threat to make you stay, they're not concerned about your happiness. They're concerned about their own fears. And so telling them, that's a mean thing to tell someone you love. It makes them consider, well, if I really do love that person, I don't want to say something mean to them. And you ask them, why would you want to make me feel bad? When you love someone, you want them to be happy. Why would you want to make me feel bad? If you really want to work on this, then tell me you'll work on yourself. Tell me you'll get help. Because if you're that close to suicide, you need help. Because quite frankly, if they want to control you, they'll likely take it a step further and make you feel even worse. They'll say or do something that puts you in empathy and guilt. I mean, the bottom line there is if they want to control you, they'll likely take it as far as they can to make you feel as bad as you can. They'll say or do something that puts you in a mixture of empathy and guilt. And if that's the case, this is where suggestion number 3 comes in. Tell them that you would like some time apart, but not to break up. Just to get some space between you and to let go of the tension and work on the relationship without both of you being so close to the problems. Now, I did get this idea from Frederick Newman's article on psychologytoday.com. Dr. Newman says that by telling the person that you want to work things out, you take some time apart to do so, it'll ease their fear and it'll make them feel a little more secure that things aren't just going to end. Because the threat of suicide can be real. And even though it wouldn't be your fault, you probably still care enough about the welfare of the person that you don't want to see them hurt themselves. And so offering the option of let's take some time apart, but to not to break up, but to work on the relationship. I work on me, you work on you, and then we'll talk about what the relationship looks like after that. If we take some time apart, we can get through this. Now, I don't recommend you say that in the heat of the moment. If they just threaten to kill themselves, then that's too soon and too sensitive and too much of a moment. Dr. Newman says in so many words to stick around a little bit longer and make them think that things are going to be okay. And that sounds a little deceptive, I understand. But what it does is it eases them away from that ledge and lets them know that they don't have too much to fear because you care. And you can say you care. I care about you so much. And if you love them, you can say, I love you. And I want you to be healthy and I want you to be well. So let's just take this day by day and see what we can do. Now, when they're off the ledge and they're not in that space, that triggered space where they're in that fear mode, then, another day you can say, look, I've been really thinking about this and I think we should just take some time apart. Now, this doesn't mean I want to break up with you. It just means I think we need to work on ourselves, because clearly there are problems in the relationship, and I want us to get through those problems. So what you're doing is you're presenting an option to them that gives you both space, especially you, to get away from each other, to be out of each other's vicinity, to be out of each other's sphere of influence, if you want to call it that, so that you're not always in each other's direct line of sight. And that might mean you stay in different places. I don't recommend staying in the same place. Like if you had different rooms in the house or something, I do recommend you get out of the house, get out of the home, get away from each other if you don't live apart already, just so that you have time to be in your own space, in your own mind, to be around people that support you, but to also remember to always convey that you're doing this for us. You're doing this to make our relationship what it needs to be. I'm not saying that you're making this relationship stronger. I'm not saying that you're doing this so we can get back together and have a wonderful life together. I'm saying you're using words to convey that no matter what this turns into, I still want to be there for you and connected to you and make sure that you and I get through this okay. Doesn't mean it has to be forever. What you're doing is sort of using some placating words. Again, a little deceptive. But if someone goes as far as threatening suicide, you might have to be a little deceptive so they stay alive. And again, 99% of the time, they're not going to do it. They don't mean it. They just want to put the fear in you so you'll do what they want you to do. But you can't take the chance on that 1%. And this is why it's tricky to talk about. It's tricky to offer ideas and suggestions on what to do, but you do what you can. And sometimes what you have to do is be a little deceptive. Sometimes you have to go in the direction that makes them feel better, that comforts them, that makes them feel secure. It's like if you're a customer in a bank and then someone comes in to rob it and they have a gun, and you decide to do speed dial on your phone and dial 911 and then hide your phone. And the robber sees you putting your phone away, and he or she comes over and says, "What did you do?" Are you going to say, "Well, I just called 911"? No, you're probably not. You're going to protect yourself. You're going to make the bank robber feel at ease. And you're going to say, "No, I wasn't doing anything. I'm sorry. I'll do anything you ask." You're going to want to make them feel at ease so that they don't fly off the handle, so that they don't start shooting. And sometimes when you're in a situation like this, you can't always be truthful. You can't. You might have to role play a little bit. And if you're in a situation where someone threatens suicide or something else major, they're going to hurt themselves, you might have to be placating. You might have to let them know that it's okay and you're still there and everything is going to be fine, and let's work this out. You might have to do that. And these are short-term things. This isn't something that lasts forever. You have to get through these short-term sensitive moments so you can get to that point where things are going pretty good and you can say, "Look, I've thought about this and I want to be able to live apart for a while." And you approach it with so much love and so much care and making them believe that it is for the best for this relationship to grow and prosper. So these suggestions are a little controversial. These suggestions might hit on your morality or your ethics. These suggestions aren't necessarily by the book. They're just ways to get through the hard times so that you can create a better situation for both of you. Because you might have to be the one to take control of this, but in a way that makes them feel comfortable and secure so that they don't fly off the handle and they don't reuse threats against you again. It's weaning you off of them so that you're both healthier. And it is tricky. I don't expect this to go 100% perfect. I'm just giving you food for thought that could be helpful if you're ever in this situation. So let me give you my last suggestion, which is this. While you're apart, and this is another Dr. Newman approach, he likes to make sure that the partner who threatened to kill themselves is reminded of all of their amazing qualities and how no matter what relationship they're in, whether it's yours or another one they're in, they're going to be just fine because they are absolutely lovable and worthy. Now, he didn't use those words exactly, but I look at it like this. When you get into a relationship with someone that uses you as their source of energy and happiness, you'll become burdened and you'll feel a lot of pressure to comply with their needs, or you face the consequences of them making you feel bad. Because if you aren't supplying them with all of these things, they're going to try to draw it out of you in some way. And that could be guilting you. That could be having you access your compassion and making you feel bad because you're not being compassionate. They're going to use these things against you. And it's, again, all based on their fears that they'll lose what they now have. You supply them with what they need instead of them supplying them what they need themselves. So having you as the source becomes a permanent need for them. And it's just so energy draining, you just can't stick around for it, which is why you do have to wean yourself off of them. Because what happens is when someone leaves the relationship, when someone leaves you and you don't want the breakup, it's like a piece of your heart is missing. It's like they've ripped it out. And if you don't have the backup system of lots of self-worth and self-esteem and self-care and self-love, it's hard to fill your heart back up. It's hard to fill that because you were so dependent on the other person. This is where they usually are. They're so dependent on you because they don't have enough self-love and self-compassion and self-care. So you become their supply. So someone who doesn't have a lot of self-worth and self-esteem tries to squeeze it out of other people. And it becomes a drain on them and will cause exhaustion and eventually a breakup because no one can sustain being that kind of energy source for long. So my point is, with a person who does this, you want to help them discover or rediscover their sense of self-worth. So even if you get to the point where you're apart and they believe you're working on the relationship with them, a good idea is to continue helping them see that they are worthy, that they are important, not just to you though, or maybe not to you at all. Maybe in general, you're so important, you're so lovable, you're so amazing, you're such a kind person. You say these things to them. It doesn't mean that you're saying it from you. Unless you mean it, you can say it from you. But what you're trying to instill is that in general, the world loves you and the world sees you as important. These people see you as worthy. These people love you and support you and want you to be happy. These people see you as smart. These people see you as pretty or handsome or whatever. It's just a reminder to them to help you help them re-nurture themselves so that they will eventually feel this so much that they don't require it from anyone else. So you're still using all of these external sources, other people, to let them know that they are valid and worthy and wonderful, but you're doing that in a way so that they aren't so reliant on you being their only source for all of that. And this is part of the process of weaning you away from them. And eventually, with enough time, you may have to get to that point where you say, you know, it's not going to work out. I love you and you're so amazing in so many ways, but I need to move on. I need to be by myself. I wouldn't recommend you say, I'm going to go date other people. I wouldn't recommend you post it on your Instagram or Facebook that you're dating someone else. I wouldn't recommend any of that because this person needs to move on as well. And I know this is a lot of work for you. I get that. But if you want to get through this sort of unscathed, it's going to be hard. But if you want to get through this, you just want to stay low and you want to do your best to make sure that they get that they are amazing in so many ways. You may not really feel that because that's going to be the hard part. If you don't feel that at all, it's going to be hard to play that game. And I'm not saying you should. I'm saying it can help. I'm saying a person that's in this space, wherever they are inside themselves, probably never got that kind of healthy nurturing. And because they never did, they seek it in other relationships so that they'll feel complete, so that they will feel fulfilled. So even if you're not in a relationship where the other person's threatening suicide or threatening to hurt themselves or threatening you in other ways, even if you're not in that type of relationship, I hope that you can see that relying on someone else to fulfill what's missing or lacking in you can be what causes an unhealthy dependency on the other person. Because if you're always seeking it from the other person and that person isn't necessarily capable of giving it, you'll always be seeking and there'll never be enough. There'll never be enough of that supply that you need. This is why you might have to be your own coach, your own therapist, your own mom, your own dad, your own best friend sometimes, just to help you fill that in yourself. So this is something good to think about is, what am I relying on in my partner that if I didn't have it from him or her, where do I get it elsewhere? And do I have enough in me that if we were to separate or break up, would my foundation be strong enough to catch me so that I could lift myself back up and get back on my feet? Is my emotional foundation strong enough to catch me so that I can get back up? Relationships can be a wonderful thing. They add to our lives. They give us experiences that we don't have when we're alone. We can't experience some of the things that we can when we have someone else in our life. And being alone has its own benefits too. It's hard to experience some of the freedoms and the liberties of being alone when you're in a relationship. I think the best of both worlds is probably the best that can happen. When you can have your individuality, the freedom to be yourself, knowing that even if this other person is no longer with me, I'll still be okay. And I love having this other person in my life, and I couldn't imagine myself with anyone else. I mean, those are healthy thoughts, even though there sounds like there's some dependency in there. But because you have a strong emotional foundation, you know you'll be okay. If they leave me, it'll hurt. I'll mourn. I'll feel awful. But I'll be okay. I'll be fine. This is a strong emotional foundation inside of you. Hopefully, whoever you're with or are going to be with in the future has that as well. That's a great topic to talk about when you're dating. Just to find out where they are. Not sure how that would come up, but maybe I'll think of a dating script one day. Thank you for joining me today. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook. The workbook is an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. If you want to pinpoint the exact behaviors causing difficulties in your relationship, including identifying all the signs of possible emotional abuse, head over to loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. Thanks again for joining me. We'll talk again soon.